Greetings and welcome to the Logic 1.4 exercise, the Chapter 1, Section 4. It's about validity, soundness, strength, and cogency. Basically, it's about going a level beyond just whether it's deductive or inductive. It's actually going 2 levels beyond that. The first question we always ask in an argument is it deductive or inductive? And that basically gives us an idea of how strong the arguer is purporting to make the argument. Are they making a necessary argument, or are they making a probabilistic argument? The next thing we do is we evaluate the inferential claim. Basically, we're saying, does it actually prove what it wants to prove? I mean, are they actually making an argument that if the premises are true, then the conclusion will be true, will necessarily be true, or likely true? Or is it the case that it says it's deductive, or it says it's inductive, but that inferential claim just isn't there? They've got a problem with their logic. The final question we ask is just, is it factual claim? It's basically just the idea of, are the premises true, and the conclusion, or the premises, are they actually true? That part of the argument is sort of the last thing we're going to evaluate. The first thing is it deductive or inductive? Next thing is how well they put it together. And the third thing is are they actually giving us true premises? So, do you have in your book, you have a chart that looks similar to this, what I have here, and it's on page 65, so if you want to turn your textbook to page 65. Essentially, what you're doing, I've just sort of turned it the other direction, is you start off with an argument, and then the type is saying, what type is it? And basically your arrow can go to the left towards deductive, or it can go to the right towards inductive. That's the first question, is it deductive or inductive? The next thing is judging the inference of it. And what we do there is we ask, is it valid or invalid if it's deductive? Meaning, is this argument actually going to prove the conclusion? Yes or no? That's valid or invalid. And inductive, is it likely going to? Is it a strong argument or is it a weak argument? We usually just use the words strong and weak, and that's pretty straightforward. And finally, from there, we begin to evaluate, if it is deductive, if it does actually prove the conclusion, the inference works, then is it sound or unsound? If it's sound, it means the premises are true, and if it's unsound, it means one or more of the premises are not true. Any invalid argument is automatically going to be labeled unsound, even if the premises are true, just as a matter of convenience, or a matter of sort of labeling it, saying this argument's not going to work. It's unsound. So essentially, and then with the inductive, you say strong or weak. If it's weak, we automatically label it uncogent. But if it's strong, then we ask, are we using true premises? If we are, we call it cogent, and if it's not, we call it uncogent. And so you can sort of follow this process down, and so you can sort of see, like, if you get an argument, you've got a collection of statements used to support one other one, of premises used to support a conclusion. What you should be able to do at the end of this chapter is you should be able to decide, and you should already be able to decide if it's deductive or inductive, but then you should be able to say, is this argument strong or weak, valid or invalid, and is it sound or unsound, cogent or uncogent. You can label all this up. And we can basically get down to a point where we can get a pretty good feel for the validity, the soundness, the cogency, and all of this helps us to know, how good is the argument. Now, valid versus invalid. This is dealing with deductive arguments. A valid argument is a deductive argument in which if the premises are true, the conclusion must necessarily be true. This is essentially the definition of deductive. It's saying it actually is right. It's not just purporting to be, if the premises are true, the conclusion must be true. Invalid, on the other hand, means it purports to be deductive, but it's not because even though the premises are true, because it's not true. I don't know why I have it. But an argument purports to be deductive, but the premises, but even though the premises are true, the conclusion could be false. I would say, but it is not so, or it is not that way, because even though the premises are true, the conclusion could be false. There's sort of a word missing. An argument that purports, there isn't kind of, it actually, an argument that purports to be deductive, but it is not, It's an argument that purports to be deductive, but it is not. The reason, or because, Even though the premises are true, the conclusion can be false. So it's an argument that purports to be deductive, but essentially the conclusion can still be false even though the premises are true, which means the inferential link isn't there. So here's some examples. Like Socrates is mortal. All mortals will die or have died. That's the definition of mortal. Therefore, Socrates will die or has died. Okay? Socrates is mortal. All mortals will die or have died. Therefore, Socrates will die or has died. This is a valid argument. Essentially, Socrates is an example of something. All examples of that have a second attribute. Therefore, Socrates has that attribute. It follows. If the premises are true, then it is. Now, right now, we're not asking the question, are the premises true? We're just asking, does the inferential claim? You need to sort of remember at this point, we're not concerned about the truth or falsity of the statement. We're only worried about, does this make sense? Okay? Another one is, all colas are soft drinks, all soft drinks are refreshing, therefore all colas are refreshing. Okay, maybe you don't agree with that. All soft drinks are refreshing. As a matter of fact, a lot of people would say they're not refreshing. But that doesn't matter. The case is we're not evaluating the validity, or I'm sorry, the truth, factual claim. We're only evaluating the inferential claim. All colas are soft drinks. All soft drinks are refreshing. Therefore, all colas are refreshing. Essentially, what's happening is all colas have this attribute. Everything that they all fall within the category of soft drinks. All soft drinks fall within the category of being refreshing. Therefore, all colas are refreshing. It works. It's valid. If those premises are true, the conclusion will be true. Now let's go with another. All wines are alcoholic. All wines must be consumed by people over 21. Therefore, all alcoholic drinks must be consumed by people over 21. Now, an interesting thing about this is all the premises here are true, right? All wines are alcoholic, correct? Let's assume when we say wine, we're not putting it further, non-alcoholic wine. If we're talking about a wine, we're talking about wine, not fruit juice that's labeled wine. All wines must be consumed by people over 21. Because they're alcoholic, that is correct. Therefore, all alcoholic drinks must be consumed by people over 21. That's as well true in the United States. So what we have here is we must be consumed by, we could say, are legally supposed to be, something like that, if we want to be more strict in our definition. But it's not valid. It's actually invalid. How? How do we know that? Well, all wines are alcoholic drinks, and all wines can be consumed by people over 21. That doesn't mean that those attributes are true of all wines. Okay? And we can sort of use what we call a counterexample method. The counterexample method basically says, break this down into the parts. Don't just look at this as trying to evaluate it by itself. Take and strip it of its language. So instead of having all wines are alcoholic, say all W for wine are alcoholic drinks. So all W are A. Wines, all wines must be consumed by people over 21. Let's say all wines are C. All wines are to be consumed by people over 21. So then we can say all alcoholic beverages are C. All A are C. So we can put that down. Now the counterexample method says find things you know are true and insert it and see if it still works. So like, for example, make W, in this case, U.S. president. And make A, in this case, men, and make C, politicians. Okay? And so you would get all U.S. presidents are men. That's true. All U.S. presidents are politicians. That's true as well. In the United States, all of our presidents have been politicians, and all of our presidents have been men. Okay? Now, it doesn't mean they will always be that way, but that is the way it is. And all U.S. presidents are politicians. Yes, that is the case. Whether you like it or not, they are all politicians. They sometimes have a House of Lords, which essentially allows for non-politicians to sit in Congress, basically their Congress, but we don't have that system here. All of our people in elected office are politicians. They have to run. Therefore, all men are politicians. Now, it's following that same form, because all U.S. presidents are men and all U.S. presidents are politicians, then you're trying to say the predicate or the part that follows that are, that those are synonymous, essentially. And that's not the case. All men are not politicians. And so we can follow this and say the premises are true and the conclusion is false Therefore, we know there is something wrong with it. This is an invalid argument. Now, one thing to remember is validity and invalidity does not need for the conclusion, can be false, and one of the premises can be false, and it can still be a valid argument. The case is we're just looking at the inferential plane. Now, if it is invalid, we automatically label it as unsound. But if it's valid, we then have to evaluate, is it sound or is it unsound? If it's true and valid, then it's sound. If it's false and valid, then it's unsound. So if it's valid, if the premises are true, or at least all the premises are true, we can label it sound. And if one of the premises is false, we label it as unsound. So sound, by definition, is a valid deductive argument that has true premises, and an unsound argument is an invalid deductive argument or valid deductive argument with one or more false premises. The key here being one or more false premises. They don't all have to be false to make it unsound. Only one of them has to be false. Okay? So, example. All dogs are felines. All felines are animals. Therefore, all dogs are animals. All dogs are felines. We can, first off, this is a sound argument. All dogs are felines. If that was true and all felines were animals, then it would follow that all dogs are animals. But in this case, one of those premises is false. All dogs are felines. That means that we would say it's valid, but it's unsound. Go with the other. All wines are alcoholics. All alcoholic beverages can be drunk by children. Therefore, all wines can be drunk by children. Once again, follows that same form. All blank are blank. All the second blank are blank. Therefore, all of the first are part of that last statement. All A or B, all B or C. Therefore, all A or C. Follows the same form. It's valid, but one of those premises is false. All alcoholic beverages can be drunk by children. That's false. Now, we can move over to inductive. Inductive is very similar. It's basically just, strong or weak is our first question, and our second question is cogent or uncogent. Strong means it's an inductive argument in which the premises are true, the conclusion is likely true, and weak is an inductive argument in which if the premises are true, the conclusion is still not likely true. This is somewhat of a judgment call. You have to read this and say, what's missing? Is this actually proving what we wanted to prove? If it is, then it's strong. If it's not, then it's weak. A lot of times there are implied premises. A lot of times there's unstated stuff. A lot of times they forget stuff and they don't tell you, and that weakens it. Like if I were to say, all presidents have been men, therefore the next president is likely to be a man, that's a strong argument. But it would be weak if I didn't tell you that, currently both the Republican and Democratic nominee are women. That would make that a very different argument. So you have to kind of pay attention that strong and weak is somewhat of a judgment call that is going to be knowing, like, is this actually giving us a good reason to believe that's true, or is it not? An example of a weak one is several U.S. presidents were Whigs, therefore the next U.S. president is likely to be a Whig. Well, several have been Whigs, but that doesn't mean it's likely the next one. It just means several have been. Okay? And in this case, the Whig Party is no longer a political party. Now, from there, we evaluate whether or not the argument is cogent or uncogent. And essentially, what we're asking is this a cogent or uncogent argument? We're asking, a cogent is an inductive argument with true premises, and an uncogent is either an either a weak argument or a strong argument, but it has a false premise. And so it's the same type of thing. What you do is you evaluate whether it's strong or weak. If it's strong and the premises are true, we label it cogent, and if not, we label it as uncogent. And that's essentially all there is